Hi. On today's episode of the podcast, I'm going to be talking to you just by myself. I've had some requests recently about people said they really liked the series that we were doing on what I learned from Dave, and a couple of people have wrote in, what have you learned from other people? And one person said, what have you learned from like everybody? Because you've had quite a history. So I thought, I don't know if I could even start to name everything that I've learned from everybody, but let me give you an overview. So that's what we're going to be looking at on today's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And hopefully that'll lead to, again, how you can develop your own style of doing whatever it is that you do, whether it's hypnosis or NLP or coaching or any of the other types of things that people can do in this coaching world. Welcome back. So, yeah, I've had a long history in this whole world. Just so you know, as you may know if you've been listening to this at all, I started off in the world as a musician. I not in the world, but in my professional career. I moved to New York City in 1980 to pursue a career. I was a youngin, pursue a career in rock and roll. I had been a classical trained pianist, but I'd always wanted to play rock and roll. Did play rock and roll even in college. And that's what I was doing in 1980. I moved to New York. Then what was happening at the time was punk. So I got into a punk rock band. That was my first New York City band. But nevertheless, around about 1985, I took my first fire walk from Tony Robbins. Not because I thought, gosh, I really want to learn NLP, because I had no idea what that was. But a girlfriend of mine had learned about NLP and Tony Robbins and this fire walk, and she went to one. And of course, the old model of how to, fill your seminars back then was based on the EST model, which is you get somebody to take the seminar and then you get them to get their friends and family to take the seminar. So it sort of builds from there. So that was the model that Tony was building off of. And so therefore she got me to go the next time around. I didn't want to, but needed to get her off my back. So I went kicking and screaming, not exactly, but I went, and it was surprisingly fun. Tony is a very edutainment kind of guy. It's fun. If you've done a fire walk, you know what I'm talking about. It's a lot of fun, and it's educational. He was teaching in the NLP way, how to change your state by visualizing differently and keeping your eyes up and saying different things so you could do anything that you wanted to do. Of course, even crazy things like walking across fire without burning yourself, which was a lot of fun. It was an introduction to NLP, which I was discovering at the time stood for Neuro Linguistic Programming. It was the first thing I'd ever did in that field. Didn't know a thing about it. I was just a musician, but it was interesting. So I went back and I got on staff and did some other things. I had no money. I was a musician. So in order to attend these things, I needed to just kind of work my way into them. Um, Finally got to an NLP certification. It's kind of a good time to learn NLP back in the mid 80s, because from Tony Robbins, at least, because I think he had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He was trying to show people that he could measure up to the other NLP people. So he went all out. There were 15-day trainings from 7 in the morning. You get up and do exercising of various kinds, and then there'd be fruit. He was very into a vegetarian lifestyle at the time. And then he'd have these long morning sessions well into the afternoon, then lunch sometime around 2 or 3 or 4 in the afternoon, then an afternoon session that would go till 10, then a dinner break, and then evening session would go to whatever time in the morning, and do that for 15 days in a row. At the training, I met Richard Bandler, I met Robert Dilts, I met Dave Dobson, I met Tad James and Wyatt Woodsmall. I met all these people that were very incredible people, and I said, golly gee, I thought it was just Tony. I didn't know any better. I thought it was all just Tony's technology, as some people then refer to it. So I thought to myself, if I really want to get good at this stuff, I should go study with those people too. And I did. First off was, I think, Dave Dobson, who you've been hearing about on this podcast. Dave Dobson was a very different kind of energy from Tony Robbins. I think I described this before, but if you know Tony, he's like, yes, go big time. And Dave was like, how are you doing? Smoking a cigarette. I don't think he actually smoked on stage, but he smoked a lot. And if he wasn't smoking on stage, it sure seemed like it, you know. He did. It was very slow pace and telling these interesting stories and funny, but weird and different. And so I, of course, wanted to learn from him. He did this thing that I thought was Ericksonian hypnosis. I didn't know who Erickson was, and I had only heard about these things, and it certainly seemed that way. Everything that seemed like that was great about NLP seemed to harken back to Erickson. Everything, at least that I was interested in, seemed to harken back to this Erickson person. He did hypnosis. He told stories. So here's this guy who's doing hypnosis and telling stories. And I, of course, assumed he was an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. So I went to study with Dave, not because he was an Ericksonian, because he was interesting, but he informed us that he was not an Ericksonian, that he developed his work independently of Milton. And so he called what he did other than conscious communication. You've heard this in our discussions with various people who were multiple offenders who went many times to Dave's fun shops, because they were workshops, not fun shops. But one of the things I learned from Tony back then was that the importance of state. One of the very first things that he emphasized was the importance of your state of mind. That if you can put yourself into a peak state or an emotionally charged state, or at least the optimal state for whatever it is you're going to be doing, then that's half the battle, if not most of the battle. Because you get access to your resources when you're in an optimal state. So if I'm going to play a piano piece, if I'm going to do that, then I need to be in a place of focus. I can't be like, yay! It's not the optimal state for something like that. You've got to be focused and maybe even calm, maybe even a sort of meditative state. So whatever the peak state is for the activity you're doing is what you want to get into. So what I learned from Tony is different ways of like doing a circle of excellence, or another different sort of anchoring techniques in order to get myself into the state that was optimal for the activity that I was doing. And as an example, putting yourself into this circle of excellence, where you step into the circle and then do a public presentation, is a great application of this. Many of my clients over the years have been people who have trouble with public speaking, fear of public speaking. So to be able to anchor the feeling of confidence from one thing, something that they're able to do, and then take that into public speaking, maybe anchor a circle of excellence on the floor. You say, step into this disc, this colored disc that is energized in a certain energy of confidence. You step into that and feel that confidence while you're talking to people. It's very useful. What I learned from Dave, many things that I learned from Dave, but one of the things I learned from Dave is that the conscious mind is different from the unconscious mind. And Dave's terminology, the other than conscious mind. And he said one of the chief differences is that the conscious mind is rational and the other than conscious mind is purposeful. Purposeful meaning it will do what you tell it. So you have to be careful what you tell it, right? And so one of the main things that he taught, I thought, at the time at least, that he taught me was that when you're going to sleep at night is a very interesting time. Because for most people, what they do is they ruminate. They think about, what they did during the day. They talk to themselves about what they didn't do well, what they should have done, what they don't want to do ever again, what they hate about that guy or whatever. They do those kinds of thoughts to themselves. And basically, they're kind of in a trance. We're in trances all the time. He agreed with Erickson about that. So that if you talk to yourself that way, your other than conscious mind goes, okay, I can do that for you. Sure enough, I can create that. Because it's like a car. The analogy Dave used, it's like a car. If you put a car in drive, it goes forward. If you put it in reverse, it goes backwards. It doesn't debate whether or not it should go forwards or backwards. It just does. In the same way, if you tell your brain, hey, I don't want to do that stupid thing anymore, brain doesn't understand the negation part, the don't. So it just says, do that stupid thing some more. And your brain goes, I'll do that for you. Sure, you got it. So you want to be very careful about the directions you give to your other than conscious mind. Basically, the idea is you're in trance all the time. It's not a question of that. Question is, can you direct your trances in an appropriate way? So that's one of the great things I learned from Dave. Now, I also studied with Richard Bandler a lot and Robert Dilts a lot. After I came back from the island, from Dave's fun shops, I discovered that Mark Thomas was right. Many of my ways of doing NLP worked better. And I started segueing from doing music for a living to start doing sessions with people. People would pay me money. What a concept. I got paid to do NLP and hypnosis with people. It's pretty neat. It was a lot better money than teaching piano lessons to 10-year-olds, which was fun too, but better money in the hypnosis. So I started doing that more and more. And as I started learning more about NLP and more hypnosis, I took other seminars from Robert Dilts, particularly. I had interest in his sleight of mouth. And I had friends who'd gone and learned about sleight of mouth, so I decided I would take his master practitioner training where he taught sleight of mouth with his partner, Todd Epstein. So I went out there to Santa Cruz, California, and did a master practitioner training with Robert and Todd. And it was fascinating. And of course, you probably know I've done a lot of sleight of mouth in my day. Following up Robert's book with my own, because the way Robert taught sleight of mouth at the seminar that I learned it from was like this, with these charts that made it really easy to learn. It's sort of a spatial anchoring for the different language patterns and things that are in there. But when his book came out, Sleight of Mouth, the book, those charts weren't in there. So I thought, well, this doesn't really help somebody learn how to do this stuff. So I just wrote my own book and put the charts in there, the charts that look something like that. If you're watching this as a video podcast, then you can see the charts. If not, you'll have to use your imagination or get your own book. It's called The User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth, available at Amazon or from my website. But yeah, so sleight of mouth is an amazing thing. It really helps you to change beliefs in a conversational way. So it's great for, coaching. I honestly, it's become so much a part of me now. I can't imagine doing coaching without a thorough grounding of sleight of mouth and, the real structure of beliefs. All beliefs have the same structure. So that's an amazing thing. But I also just learned so much from Robert in so many other ways. He's also was, along with Tim Halbum, who created the allergy cure. It's just he's such a shining example of how to, look for the structure of the subjective experience that is NLP. So amazing fellow. Richard Bandler was also amazing to study with because he was the creator of NLP. So when I, went to my first Richard Bandler training, I thought, oh my God, this is what it's really like. It's not just Tony and Tonyisms or Robert and his way of being so analytical and thorough, but, Richard had a whole nother way of being about him. And if you've ever been to any of Richard Bandler's seminars, you know what I'm talking about. He was a little scary, to tell you the truth. Remember one time I went to a seminar of his in New York, and I'd run there and taken the subway, and I grabbed a muffin on my way. It's like, okay, I made it. And I'm sitting down about to eat the muffin, the eighth row of the seminar. And he was, put that away! You don't eat. Called me out in front of everybody else. A memorable moment. Yes, but one of the main things I learned from Richard is the value of language and the artful use of it, but also how that with modalities and submodalities that you change the way you're thinking about something, the way you picture something, the way you talk to yourself, and that can shift everything. It can be a very subtle representation. A great story I heard about Richard is later, after I'd had my trainer's training with him. He was a funny stage of his life where he was throwing out candy to people in the seminars. He had this big like bowl of like a Halloween basket of all this hard candy, and just throw it out to the audience. Have candy, have candy. Yeah. And then, okay, that's fine. Candy's good for you. Sugar makes you happy. I don't know, but he was doing that, and then later I heard that he'd come down with adult onset diabetes. What a surprise! And that the story was this. This is the story. I was told that he kind of woke up in the hospital after a diabetic coma, and they saved him and they brought him to the hospital, and then they were, the doctor or nurse or whoever was talking to them after he came to and was saying, okay, there's going to need to be some lifestyle changes now, of course, no more candy like that. And also we understand you're a smoker, so you need to quit smoking. And we have some programs that you can help you with. And he said, okay, hold on a second. And he just went to this thing in his brain. His eyes were moving around different ways. And he said, okay, what else? I said, okay, we have some different programs that you can help you quit smoking. He said, no. I just did that. What else do you have on your list? So he had that ability to just go inside and reprogram his brain to, change the modalities, change the cigarette, probably took the picture of the cigarette and moved it far away and made it black and white, or did something in his brain so that it was just done, no longer an issue. I love that story. I assume it's pretty true. With Richard, I don't know if you always can be sure if they are as true. Richard also has a reputation for using stories that were true for somebody else and telling them in the seminars if they happen to him, because it works better as a story, apparently, that way. I know Dave Dobson had some stories about Richard using some of his life experiences. In fact, little story about that. I remember Dave talking about Richard once and saying that, God damn it, Richard, if you want some experience, go get some. As not my best Dave imitation, but it was something like that. And so I took that to heart, and I decided I would get some experience of my own. And that's when I went and volunteered for the Department of Complementary Medicine at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, where I did hypnosis for heart patients before they went in for surgery. So pre-surgical hypnosis up there under the auspices of a doctor named Oz, who was a brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon up at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, Dr. Oz. Pretty cool guy. Another person I trained with extensively was Stephen Gilligan. Now, I mentioned I was a musician, and I mentioned that I'd taken all these NLP trainings, but I think I might have mentioned also along the way somewhere that when I tried to take Ericksonian hypnosis trainings from actual Ericksonian hypnotists who were Ericksonians, not like Dave developing their things differently, but actually studied with Milton. Now they're teaching what Milton taught them. They wouldn't let me in the door. I literally signed up for this thing. And back in the late 80s, I think I probably made a phone call or something, said I'd be over there and I'd bring a check or something like that. Or maybe I sent the check in to a mailing address or something. But when I got there, they literally wouldn't let me in the door. They said, oh, yes, we've checked your references, and no, you are not eligible for this class. And they shut the door in my face. They wouldn't let me in the door to study Ericksonian hypnosis. And I thought, well, gosh, I'm out there telling everybody I'm an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. Maybe you'd want to, know what I'm doing and make sure that I'm doing the right things so that it, meets the standard of Ericksonian hypnosis. Maybe you'd want some input. But no, they didn't. So they just said, no, leave. But fortunately, I did find a few folks who would teach me. So one of them was Stephen Gilligan, and I got into some of the trainings that he did. And from Stephen, I learned a lot. Stephen is a great Ericksonian. He's also studied with Bandler and Grinder, so that was probably why he had a soft spot for people who weren't, the traditional Ericksonian types who were PhDs or LSWs or, whatever letters they could have after their name. I didn't have any letters after my name. So, but he let me in. And so one of the things I learned from Stephen was really also pretty cool. He was in a similar way to Dobson, saying that there's a difference between the conscious mind and the other than conscious mind, although he didn't use that terminology. For Stephen, it was more the difference between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind. Pretty sure that would be the terminology he would use. He said that the conscious mind is, like Dave said, it's rational, but he said it was an either or logic base. Whereas he said that the unconscious mind can have a both and logic base. And that's confusing sometimes for the conscious mind that tries to keep things, it's good or it's bad, it's black or it's white, it's up or it's down, it's logical, rational, this or that. So it's confusing to have a both and thing that the unconscious mind can fully appreciate. Like I'm lying in bed dreaming that I'm, I don't know, running on a train in Siberia or whatever, escaping from a KGB agent or something. And yet I'm lying in my bed, warm and cozy. But both are true. I am on that train running. I'm also lying in my bed. Both are true at the same time. And he said, but that can be expanded just to normal awareness. Like I can be both part of a conversation and apart from a conversation at the same time. I can both be here and there at the same time. Really useful concept. And to apply that in hypnosis and apply that in life is very, 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 very valuable. I've used it a million times. I also learned some really great trance inductions from Stephen Gilligan, and oh boy, rich, deep learning there. One of my other teachers, and I'm giving a broad overview here. I could spend hours talking about what I learned from any of these people, any one of them. Stephen Gilligan, I'm really just sort of touching the surface of the things that I've learned from him. And I don't want to spend too much time on this one podcast, so I'll just go on to say I also learned a whole lot from David Gordon. David Gordon, I'll replay a podcast or a conversation I had with him soon, maybe next week or sometime soon. He was it was nice enough to do a conversation with me last December for a fundraiser we were trying to do, where we did for Mary Lou Seavey, and had a good conversation with David. David is an amazing guy. He is just a wonderful, wonderful person. And, throughout my training of NLP, whenever I learned NLP from anybody, they always talked about how NLP really is modeling, that you model another person and you can model the excellence that they bring to hypnosis. You can model Erickson and, take on the work of his abilities, but it was all very vague. Nobody really said, how do you do that? They talked about modeling projects where they would model sharpshooters in the Army, and apparently Tony Robbins and Wyatt Woodsmall and others were involved in this project, but they modeled these sharpshooters and then made it better for the rest of the sharpshooters. They were able to, hone in on what was really important, make the sharpshooting business better. So, but again, nobody really said, how do you do that? I once listened to a whole tape set, like a 36-hour tape set of John Grinder teaching modeling. And maybe if it had been a videotape set, I'd have learned something valuable, but I swear to God, I learned nothing from that tape set. Not that they didn't know how to do it, but they certainly didn't know how to break it down and teach it so that somebody like me could learn it, say it like that. But David did. David figured out with his partner, Graham Dawes, how to really do modeling and how to teach it. It was amazing to learn that. How to really get to the heart of the matter and what is modeling. How do you ask questions that elicit the person's structure of an ability? So as an example, if you want to model Milton Erickson, you don't want to model Milton Erickson. You want to model an ability of Milton Erickson's, like perhaps his ability to do trance inductions with people. You don't want to model Milton. That's why Stephen Gilligan got stuck in the wheelchair for a while, because it's like, you don't want to model how you to be a cripple. That's not valuable information. But you might want to model how he does hypnosis. You don't want to model Tiger Woods' marital strategies, but you might want to model Tiger Woods' ability to drive a golf ball if you're a golfer. So you find out what is the ability that they have that you want to model. So you model that ability. That's a pretty important distinction, don't you think? I think so. So, and then, when I learned that from David, he had such a clear way of teaching this that I could get it. And again, there was a visual model. Maybe I'm a visual learner, I don't know, but there was a visual model, a kind of flow chart of those things that were important in order to model that ability. He called it the experiential array. So David and Graham Dawes created this whole thing. I took the training from a couple of friends of mine who sponsored it in New York, Stephen Leeds and Rachel Hott, the NLP Center of New York. But they brought David out. It's a 12-day training. Kind of cool. At that training, Leslie Cameron Bandler was there. I think she was just going by Leslie Cameron, her original name at the time, but she was there. I'd taken a seminar from her years ago as well. So it was fun to see them together again. David and Leslie did some good work together. So David Gordon is great. And also what I learned from David, just sort of subconscious modeling, perhaps, is just, how to be a mensch. I don't know. He was great. He was great in the way that he was generous with his time and his attention with people. He taught at a rhythm and pace that was slow but thorough. He didn't go any faster than the audience or the group could go. He gave very clear, instructions, and, it was just great. So I've really tried to model that, if you will, in my own teaching since then. To say, when somebody's not getting it in the group, that's valuable for me to make my training better, but it's valuable for the group to really understand how to get it across in a very clear way. So it's great. I learned so much from David in so many different ways. David also is the person who wrote Therapeutic Trances, I believe was the name of his book. Could be wrong about that, but something like that. Which is a way of thinking about how you do an Ericksonian type of story, a therapeutic metaphor. How do you structure that? In his book on that, in the seminar I took from him on that, again, brilliant stuff and beautiful, wonderful training by David Gordon. I've talked about it recently on an interview conversation with Bill O'Hanlon, how not only did I learn from Bill, because, here's a quick story. Those people that shut the door in my face, backing up a bit, the Ericksonian, what was it called? NICEF, New York Society for Ericksonian Psychotherapy and Hypnosis. NICEF, New York Society for Ericksonian Psychotherapy and Hypnosis. I figured out that there was a loophole in their requirements for membership, that if you were a matriculated student in a psych degree program, whether or not you got that degree yet, your LSCW or your Master's of Social Work, whatever, if you were a matriculated student, then they would allow you into their things. So I actually did do that. I matriculated at a university without walls. This is before the internet, or at least before it was doing much of anything. And so it was like a correspondence course thing of this place. I actually got Stephen Gilligan to sign on as my mentor, although I never finished the degree. But they accepted me into their folds, and I attended several very wonderful workshops, including one where I met Bill O'Hanlon. Bill taught some great things, but it was his book, Taproots, that really did a lot for my understanding about Ericksonian hypnosis. It really took the idea of all this, learning and sort of general and stories and, Mishigas, and just this whole big thing of Ericksonian has sort of made it really clear in a way that I got it. And one of the chief ways he said was this: he taught three. In that book, he delineated three different ways that Erickson would do psychotherapy with people differently depending on the person. And this is, I think, really critical to my understanding of Ericksonian hypnosis. And that it was this: he said, when it comes to something like bedwetting, as an example, if a kid comes into a traditional hypnotherapist for bedwetting, the traditional hypnotherapy is, okay, you do an induction, You get the person down deeper and deeper, deeper, and maybe there's a deepening part. And then when they get deep enough in trance, then you give them direct suggestions like you will stop wetting your bed, you'll have dry beds, and that sort of thing. And then you bring them out of trance. Perhaps you give them a post-hypnotic suggestion like anytime you see the color red, you'll remember that you have dry beds from now on. So that sort of thing. And that is basically the structure of hypnosis, no matter what the problem is. You've got the induction and the deepening procedure. You give direct suggestions, then you bring them out, have a post-hypnotic suggestion, and send them on their way. He in this book, Bill O'Hanlon cites 3 cases by Milton Erickson where they are all very, very different. I don't know if I should go into them now. They might take me a while to really delineate the 3, but broad overview, brief overview. First child that was brought in, Milton said to them, well, tell you what, mother, father, why don't you leave the room and let me just talk to this child by himself for a bit. I'm not sure that's the wisest idea in today's climate, but this is what was happening back in the 50s. So Milton sent the parents away, and he started talking to the boy about baseball because the kid was an avid baseball player. He said, I love baseball. Baseball is such a great sport, isn't it? Not like football. This kid's older brother played football, was kind of a football star, and he was bigger and stronger than his younger brother, and said, yeah, I don't like that football stuff, Milton. I don't like that football stuff. You use your gross big muscles for that. Anybody can do that. But baseball requires fine muscle control, doesn't it? Because to do baseball successfully, you've got to, if you're going to catch the ball, you got to position yourself at just the right time and just the right place to clamp down on that ball and clamp down tight so you can catch it. That requires fine muscle control, which you have. And then likewise, to throw the ball back to the infield, you've got to transfer the ball from the glove hand to the throwing end. That requires fine muscle control. And then to throw it back, you've got to let go at just the right time to get it where you want it to go, because that constitutes success in baseball. Now, this is done wide open-eyed. This is a conversation. There's no hypnosis per se going on here, and yet it got the result. And so all 3 cases that Bill cited are like that. They're different depending on the person, and there's no hypnosis involved. There's never any like, okay, close your eyes, go deeper, deeper, deeper. Now I'm going to, nothing like that happened at all. So I think we're getting close to about a half hour here. In fact, perhaps a bit further. So I'm going to cut this short. Suffice it to say, I've studied also with, Betty Alice Erickson. It was a delight to meet her and to get to know her and work with her and others in this field. But ultimately, it boils down to doing what you do in your way. So you take the learnings that you get from all these different people and find out what is the right way for you to do it, and find out, your own O'Brien hypnosis, or, you're filling your last name, not Ericksonian or Dobsonian or whatever hypnosis, but your hypnosis, your way of doing coaching, your way of doing NLP. Find your style for doing that and let it be coming from you. That's the message, I suppose, of all this. But I appreciate your being here today, and I hope to see you in some classes and things going forward.